Welcome back to the channel. In today's video it's our first wildcard draft going into game week 17. First up in goal is David De Gea for Man United. United have been playing well recently, and over their last half a dozen games they've conceded no more than a single goal a game. De Gea always seems to pick up save points, and so should be a contender for bonus points in games where he's able to keep a clean sheet. He also has 3 good fixtures, followed by fixtures where we can easily rotate him with our bench goalkeeper. Our first defender on the draft is of course Kieran Trippier for Newcastle, who has an away match against Leicester. Trippier just isn't going anywhere, and it's too dangerous to your rank to not own him. He has multiple avenues to points, from corners to free kicks, and obviously Newcastle's great defensive record helps with clean sheets. Due to his attacking threat during matches as a defender, the bonus point system loves him, and as long as he stays fit, he's a seasoned keeper in my eyes. Joining him in defence is João Cancelo for the away game against Leeds. You'd have to say that Cancelo and Man City's defence as a whole have been a bit underwhelming so far this season. In the last few weeks prior to the World Cup, they weren't performing up to their usual high standards. However, following the break, I expect them to come back stronger. We do have the possibility of replacing Cancelo here with a Liverpool fullback, but at the moment I just trust City's defence slightly more. Finally, in the 3-man defence is Gabriel for Arsenal. Arsenal have been defending well this season, and out of the multiple options to choose from, I do prefer Gabriel and Saliba. Gabriel just winning out due to fewer yellow cards. I have owned players like White for short periods of the season, and he's also a good pick, but just lacks that goal threat from corners and set pieces. Although Ramsdale seems to be a good option, I just think he takes up a valuable Arsenal spot. One to monitor though is definitely Zinchenko, as we know how well he started off the season before picking up an injury. Our first midfielder is Gabriel Martinelli. I have considerable value built up in Martinelli, and I'm sure many of you do too. He still remains to be one of the best options at his price point, especially as he's a nailed attacker in one of the most prolific offences in the league. The plan is to hold on to Martinelli for the foreseeable future. The only 2 scenarios that would make me reconsider this is if Smith Rowe were to come back from injury and start sharing minutes with him, or if Arsenal were to pick up key injuries and to start performing poorly. It's worth considering that there are multiple midfield options available to us. We've doubled up with Arsenal in midfield with Saka. In the first half of the season, he looked to be one of Arsenal's most promising players in terms of goals and assists. People often comment about Gabriel Jesus not scoring enough goals, but often he drops back and picks up the ball deep to allow players like Saka and Martinelli to run in behind. Arsenal have a mixed bag of fixtures moving forwards, but I fully expect them to continue dominating matches and creating plenty of goal scoring opportunities. Joining him in midfield is Andreas Pereira for the away match against Crystal Palace. Fulham have been impressive in the first half of the season and continue to play attacking football. Andreas is without a doubt the best player at his price point in midfield. He's on many set pieces, corners, free kicks and potentially even penalties. He also creates plenty of goal scoring opportunities from open play, including delivering multiple crosses for the likes of Mitrovic. He may be a benching dilemma each week, but that can only be a positive thing. Finally, to make up the midfield is James Maddison for the home match against Newcastle. On paper, Leicester have a tough opening couple of fixtures following the World Cup, against Newcastle and Liverpool. However, Maddison is the team's talisman, and every time Leicester score, he's almost always involved. He also has the potential of returning against nearly every team he faces, and I just think it's worth jumping on Maddison early before he gets picked up by other fantasy managers. Which means that for the first time this season I've gone for 3 up front, and firstly it's Harry Kane. There's definitely a decision to be made as to whether to go for Kane or Salah going into this run of fixtures, but I just haven't been convinced by Liverpool and Salah this season. He also takes up a valuable midfielder spot. Liverpool could change formation yet again once Diaz and Jota return, which could potentially affect Salah's position on the pitch. Although Salah is fairly nailed, Kane almost always plays 90 minutes for Spurs and has penalties. Tottenham have a few attacking assets returning to the team after the World Cup, and I only think this makes Kane a better pick. Joining him is Erling Haaland for the away game against Leeds. Man City have quite favourable fixtures the other side of the World Cup, and because they now find themselves 5 points behind Arsenal, I expect Pep to play his strongest side in the Premier League over the new year, which includes Haaland. I know he hasn't scored big points over the last month or so, but we can't forget what he did at the beginning of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him recreate that goal scoring form when we return from the break. Finally, making our starting 11 is Mitrovic for the away match against Palace. I quite fancy Fulham in this game and also expect Mitrovic to get a fair few returns over the next 6 games. He was ruthless at the start of the season when Fulham had some tough games, with constant crosses being provided by the likes of Andreas, Willian and Wilson. I expect he might be on the score sheet often once the Premier League resumes in December. Selecting him will of course be dependent upon whether he's able to fully recover from the ankle injury he picked up a few weeks ago. Making the bench is Ward in goal, Almiron, Zuma and Patterson. Ward is fairly self-explanatory, a cheap playing goalkeeper who can easily rotate with De Gea, especially in game week 20 and 21. Almiron is proving to be one of the best cheap midfielders in the game, and as a Newcastle fan I would predict that because of the way Eddie Howe plays, he'll be nailed in that right wing position for the rest of the season. Cresswell is a good rotation option from game week 18 onwards, with 4 nice fixtures in a row, and of course he's on set pieces. And finally, Patterson is likely to be the 3rd player on the bench each week. It's still unknown whether he makes Everton's starting lineup, but at the moment he's probably the best 4-mil defender in the game. Here's a list of players who I'll be keeping a close eye on going into game week 17. These are players who are either in contention to make the game week 17 wildcard, or ones who I'll be monitoring on the watch list for the first few fixtures after the Premier League resumes in late December. Just remember, there's a couple of factors we should take into account before deciding on our final game week 17 team. Firstly, there will likely be injuries over the World Cup, so it's impossible to lock in a team for now. Secondly, we need to consider the possibility that although certain teams have played well prior to the World Cup, a 6-week break is not far off a pre-season break, and so there may be differences in performances of certain teams when the Premier League resumes. Thirdly, there are a couple of teams who appointed new managers just before the World Cup, namely Southampton and Aston Villa. Although these teams were performing poorly, we should keep a close eye on the potential of them improving, especially given favourable fixture runs. Finally, as there are no price changes of the players in FPL over the World Cup, there's no point in making transfers for now. A better idea would be to just plan out your wildcard team on a website such as fpl.team prior to game week 17. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to see more of this type of content for the remainder of the 22-23 FPL season, and thanks for watching.